is the only bit of shameless self-promotion that I've got in this presentation. I was at the last one of these in Perth, actually. It was a guy called, was it Chris Graham, that did the presentation on rock climbing.
Yes.
Which I thought was absolutely fantastic, because he's an IT guy, and you never would have thought that he would be interested in rock climbing.
Absolutely.
It inspired me. It didn't inspire me to do rock climbing because I'm terrified of heights, but it inspired me to watch Touching the Void, which is a fantastic film. So even with vertigo, I got something out of that. Okay. So I thought about, well, what's my passion? And there it is, unfortunately, it's drink. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Any kind of drink. I love Czechoslovakian lager. I love all kinds of Scottish whiskey. If anybody hasn't tried Albicki vodka at the moment, that's my new passion. That's absolutely fantastic. But I had to narrow the presentation down a little bit today, so I decided to keep it to wine, and I decided to keep it to French wine. Why France? Well, is it the world's largest producer? No, that's Italy. Is it the biggest amount of imports into the UK? No, that's Australia. What it is about French wine, though, I think, is the diversity of the different wines you can get from France. There's been an expansion in the New World at the moment. You can get wines in great numbers from anywhere around the world now. But what a lot of these countries have done is looked at what their climate's like, looked at what their soil's like, found an area in Spain that is similar to that, and copied it. But they haven't quite got the romance of the French wine yet. I've brought with me along today a bottle, which is just over there actually, which demonstrates the enjoyment that I get from wine. It's a 1962. It's not a particularly good 1962 bottle. Certainly you can spend more if you are out in a pub, if you really go for it, than I spent on that bottle of wine. But what I like to think when I'm drinking something like that is, that was bottled in 1962. In 1962, John F. Kennedy was president. In 1962, the Beatles had just been turned down at their first audition. And I've got this image in my head of somebody on an old 1962 tractor bumping through the vineyards with a parcel of grapes in the back of the lorry, putting it into the wine, and then years later, here I am in my lounge drinking this wine. And there's a wee bit of history that goes along with that. As I say, you can have a wee look at the bottle that I've brought with me today as well. I've also brought something for people to try for those of you that aren't driving as well. I wanted to give a little bit of advice on today's presentation. So the first thing that I've got here is, how much should I spend? I wouldn't advise anybody goes for the absolute budget wine, and the reason for that is the amount of tax that the government charges on wine is standard, it's constant regardless of what you're spending. So if you spend £5 on a bottle of wine, the grower actually gets about 50p for that. If you up your spend a little bit to maybe 10 or 12 pounds, the grower will get over half of that cost. So it's probably good to spend maybe a little bit more than a lot of people would initially like to spend. Another reason that I like France as a region is they have some quite comprehensive wine laws, and that started really with the problems that they had with the Champagne wars back in the 1970s, 80s, I can't remember quite, but anybody from an emerging wine market that had a fizzy bottle of wine used to call it champagne, and that diluted the French wine brand. So French wine law now means that for a wine producer to put a region on their bottle, and even a vintage on their bottle, they have to adhere to certain laws. It has to come from a certain area, it has to use a certain type of grape. Basically, you get guaranteed a certain type of quality. Champagne, they say, and I agree with, you don't get bad champagne, you get good champagne, you get better champagne. Another thing that's come out of that, though, which is quite interesting if you're looking for something a bit different and a bit special, is the garage wine phenomena in France. Now, it started out basically with a lot of different growers getting together who had parcels of grapes left over, and they thought, well, what can we do with this? Can we make something that's really quite good just for ourselves that doesn't necessarily comply with French wine law? So they used the best of what they could get, and it got sold locally to start off with. There's a few big companies such as Laithwaite's that have started using the garage wine phenomena as a bit of a clever marketing strategy now, but basically Laithwaite's, all they're allowed to put on that bottle is garage wine. They can't even put a vintage on there anymore. But if you're spending maybe £10 for a bottle of wine and it doesn't have anything on it, it could be a garage wine, it could be quite good. The best way to make sure you're getting something that isn't just conning you, though, is to go and speak to a reputable wine merchant and ask them for some recommendations. Another way to ensure value is to look at the supermarkets. You will see in the supermarkets a lot of the aisles along the wine have reduced to clear on them. Should you go for the reduced to clear? No, you shouldn't. The reason they're wanting to get rid of that wine is because they've overbought and they need to sell it off quickly at a loss. Supermarkets aren't very good at storing their wine, so it's probably a little bit ropey by the time that you buy it. Where you can get the fantastic value though from supermarkets is from their finest range. The reason for that is that supermarkets have an enormous amount of buying power to the point now that they usually bypass all of the middlemen and just go straight and buy a vineyard in France somewhere and will produce wine under their own label. And if you spend maybe 10 or 12 pounds for a bottle of wine from a supermarket's finest range, you're probably getting some of the best value that you can possibly get. Does anybody have any questions before we move over to tasting some?
Must be a question about wine. Julie?
Yeah, I don't drink French wine, honestly.
You're not? Where'd you go from?
I go wherever it's for.
Okay.
Where was that, Edith?
Sorry, John.
A lot of people will say that they don't like wine, and I find that a challenge because in France in particular, the diversity is such that you can't not like wine. That's like saying...
I've had wine from 1964 and 1965 and whatever.
If you're getting the really, really old stuff, then how it's been stored up until that point makes an enormous amount of difference. The bottle that I've got over there from 1962, you need to be quick as well, because as soon as you open that cork, it's going to go into shock. If you don't drink it with an hour of popping the cork, it's going to start to turn to vinegar. So there's a bit of a ritual to drinking really good wine, and if I'm honest, I don't think I could tell the difference between a £20 bottle and a £100 bottle of wine. I could probably, I hope, tell the difference between a £10 bottle and £20, and I really hope that I could tell the difference between a £5 and a £10. You get the law of diminishing returns if you spend any more than that.
John, is there more preservative in new wine wines than there is old? Because I get headaches with most new wine.
If I'm honest, probably less, because everything's done on quite a big budget. If you're talking about Australia in particular, it's all stainless steel, sanitised vats, and they don't need to put the level of tannins in that certain other
I was
wines do.
under the misconception that
You might get some unscrupulous con merchants that are trying to sell wine really, really cheaply from some... But no, it's gone are the days where you need loads and loads of tannin and you need to take a very long time to let the tannins break down, both in storing the wine and after you open it. So if you go to the newer wells, it should give you less of a headache.
That's useful.
Okay.
Okay. I've got a bottle to open, and this is going back to the garage wine phenomenon. I've never had it before, but I thought I would take my own advice. So I've gone to Tesco's, and I bought something from their finest range, and I bought a fizzy French wine that's not champagne. Because they can't call it champagne because it comes from a different region, it's not going to attract the premium that a good champagne would. So I spent about £8 on it, and I'm hoping that that will be the same as a £15 or £16 bottle of champagne, but we'll see. I'll go and pop the cork just now, and if anybody wants to come for a wee taste, they can do that. Okay?
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.